Hiya Seven, I hope you're all well. This lesson we're going to have a look at transportation. So we're going to have a look at how material is transported along the coast. So on the beach, you might find shells, pebbles, perhaps sea animals, rocks, tyres, rubbish and all sorts of things that is being washed up. So it's washed up through swash and it's removed through backwash. All this material has come from somewhere. So we know that this process is the sea transporting or moving them. There's two images here. So on the first one, you can see that the rocks are quite jagged, they're quite rough, whereas on the second one, they're quite rounded pebbles and quite smooth. What will have happened is this rock on the first image will have been eroded, it had been picked up through backwash and taken back out to sea. Then it will have been carried by a process of transportation. It will have been eroded even further through the process of attrition, so the rocks colliding together, and it will have been smoothed out and become more rounded, and then it'll have been dropped and deposited further along the coastline, and it would look more rounded and more smooth and smaller because of the process of attrition eroding the pebbles down. So there are four ways that the sea transports things, and we're going to have a look at these four ways in more detail. So the first one is traction. Now, traction is where the rocks are really large, they're really big rocks, and they're rolled along the seabed. The sea hasn't got the energy to pick the rocks up, they're too big and they're too heavy, and therefore they're rolled along the seabed. An easy way to remember this is the wheels of a tractor are obviously really, really big, and they roll along the ground. So traction and tractor just means that they roll along the seabed. Now, that's an easy way to remember it. Saltation. Saltation is where the rocks bounce along the seabed. So they're picked up and then dropped further along and they bounce. And what happens is one rock might be picked up and then dropped through bouncing. And when it's dropped, that rock might hit another one and force that rock to bounce. Okay, so it's like a chain reaction. Suspension is where the water might look a bit dirty. So you've ever been to the coast, perhaps you've been to Blackpool or Lytham, and you ever thought, oh, that water looks a bit dirty, a bit brown. This is where the sediment, the material is carried in suspension. So it's just carried throughout the water. It's not rolled or bounced along the seabed, it's carried through the water. So it's really fine particles, like sand. And then finally, solution. Solution, you can't see, it's invisible. So solution is just where the material is dissolved in the water. So imagine putting salt into, or sugar into a glass of water, and if you stir it for long enough, eventually it will dissolve and it'll become invisible. So rock like limestone, when it's eroded, can dissolve in the water. Okay, so what I want you to do is reproduce the diagrams of the different transportation. So there's four, and they're quite simple for you to copy, just leave enough room for you to write around. So once you've copied the diagram, or I'll put it on Show My Homework, you can also print it out or use it on the computer if you want to. What you need to do is read these four statements and just match them up with the correct image and title. So match it to the correct type of transportation and write them on your diagram. Pause it here before I go into the next slide, because I'm going to put the answers on and talk you through them again in a bit more detail. So just pause it here if you've not finished it, and then you can press play again once you've done it. Okay, so the answers are coming on now. Okay, so traction is where the pebbles or the large rocks are rolled along the seabed. You can see that image there, they're just rolled, they're not lifted off the seabed. And then number two, saltation, is the pebbles are moved when one pebble hits another and it bounces along the seabed, so it sets up a chain reaction. Suspension is fine sediment that's carried in the water, so things like sand, and that's what makes it look dirty. And then solution is the dissolved material, like limestone, that's carried along, but you can't see it, it's invisible, it's been dissolved in the water. And then finally, what I want you to do is just answer this format question. So describe the different types of sediment transportation. What I've done is in blue, I put the sentence starters for you, just to help you. You could try and do this without your notes, see if you can remember them, and you can check back them with your notes if you wanted to, just to challenge yourself a little bit more. Once you finish, please can you upload all your work to show my homework? So you can upload your exam question, and you can also upload your diagram to show my homework. Please remember to follow the geography Twitter account, which is St Bede's Blackburn Geography. You might see some of your work on there as well. And then there will also be a quiz on Show My Homework based around this lesson, and perhaps some questions from the previous lessons as well for you to complete as normal. Thank you for listening.